Is this some kind of joke? The voice, sharp and dripping with youthful arrogance. Cut through the desert air, Corporal. Evans, barely out of his teens but wearing his Marine Corps uniform like a badge of invincibility, gestured dismissively toward the rifle resting on the shooting bench. Sir, you can't be serious about bringing that thing here. Alan Palmer, an 82-year-old man whose years showed in the fine lines around his eyes and the steady patience in his jaw, didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed downrange, where waves of heat rippled above the parched earth, turning the distant targets into trembling mirages. He sat on a simple wooden stool, posture relaxed but grounded, steady as the land itself. The rifle causing such commotion was indeed unusual. Its custom-built frame and stock were coated in a dull, non-reflective orange, the color of a construction cone or a child's toy. It looked entirely out of place among the muted blacks, sandy tans, and olive tones of the military-grade weapons that filled the long-distance range. Nearby, another young Marine, a freckle-faced private first class, snorted. Maybe he thinks it's a water gun, Corporal. You know, for when he gets thirsty. Their small group laughed, clean uniforms, fresh haircuts, and all the confidence of modern training. They were the new generation, experts in digital optics, laser rangefinders, and ballistic calculators. To them, the old man and his bright orange rifle were museum pieces, an amusing sideshow before their real session began. Evans stepped closer, his shadow stretching across Alan's bench. I'm going to have to ask you to pack up your gear, sir, he said curtly. This range is for active duty personnel only. We're conducting advanced sniper training. He nodded toward the orange rifle. That thing's a distraction and a safety hazard. His tone was a carefully practiced mix of command and condescension, the kind of confidence young men wield when they believe they hold authority. Alan Palmer didn't reply. His hands rested calmly on his knees, his stillness more unsettling than any verbal retort. It wasn't defiance, it was composure, the kind that comes from experience too vast to be shaken by arrogance. The Mojave Range stretched around them, a barren landscape of dirt and rock built for the thunder of rifles and the science of precision. Yet in this small confrontation, silence dominated. Nearby shooters paused, conversations fading as they watched the exchange unfold. The air felt charged, not with gunpowder but with tension. Corporal Evans, feeling the weight of onlookers and mistaking the old man's quiet as defiance, raised his voice, violating the very etiquette he claimed to enforce. Did you hear me, old man? I said, pack it up. What are you even doing here? This isn't bingo night at the VFW. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a mock whisper still loud enough for everyone to catch. You probably don't even have clearance to be on this range. Finally, Alan moved, slowly and deliberately. His hand reached for his worn canvas range bag, every motion deliberate, unhurried, and calm. It was the kind of silence that didn't signal retreat, but the quiet before something unforgettable. The Marine stiffened, expecting the old man to give in. Instead, Alan reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind softened by decades of use. He unfolded it and produced a laminated card, his base access permit, and held it out silently. Evans snatched it, glancing at it briefly before looking again, disbelief flickering across his face. This has to be expired, or fake. He turned it over in his hands repeatedly as though the plastic might suddenly reveal a trick. But the name Palmer Alan J. was clear and every credential was valid. Frustrated, Evans shoved the card back. His inability to find a reason to send the old man away only deepened his irritation. Fine, he said tightly. You have access. But that doesn't mean you can mess around here. We're running a 4,000-meter qualification with a multi-million-dollar sensor suite. This isn't a place for personal experiments. He gestured toward a target barely visible on the horizon. We're testing the limits of precision. The last thing we need is a stray shot from whatever that is messing up our data. The private first class, encouraged by his corporal's tone, reached forward and tapped the orange rifle stock with a finger. Feels like cheap plastic, he mocked. You probably 3D printed it in your garage? The moment his hand touched the rifle, Alan Palmer's eyes shifted. The calm, patient expression vanished, replaced by something cold and ancient. For a heartbeat, the desert range faded, replaced by the memory of a smoky field tent, the air thick with the smell of cordite and blood. He felt again the weight of a wounded comrade slumped against him, and heard the distant, steady thud of approaching mortar fire. A voice from decades past echoed in his mind. "They're coming, Al. They know we're here. You have to finish it." The orange paint wasn't decoration, and it was survival. A rescue signal for the chopper to find him among the endless green canopy of the jungle. A single bright mark in a sea of camouflage. Then the vision was gone. The heat and laughter of the desert returned. Alan hadn't moved or spoken, but something had shifted. His quiet dignity now carried weight, the kind that demanded respect without asking for it. Across the range, near the tower, Gunny Miller watched. A retired master sergeant turned civilian range safety officer, Miller had seen plenty of arrogant young Marines. But this was different. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was who they were directing it toward. The old man wasn't some hobby shooter. There was discipline in his stillness and purpose in the way he sat. And the rifle, strange as it looked, had the precision lines of a specialized weapon, not a toy. Miller's eyes narrowed. He'd seen a rifle like that before, long ago in a classified briefing about a ghost soldier. A legend from a war most people had forgotten. He remembered the name he'd read on the sign-in sheet that morning. Palmer, Alan J. The realization hit him like a weight in his gut. Those young Marines had no idea who they were provoking. They weren't mocking an old man, they were taunting a legend. Miller turned away, pulling his phone from his pocket. He stepped behind the tower, out of sight, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Calling the base command while on civilian duty was far beyond his authority, a move that could cost him his job. But something in his gut told him it was necessary. When the line connected, he spoke quietly but firmly. "Lieutenant, this is Gunny Miller at the long-range facility. We've got a situation you need to know about. A few young Marines from 1st Recon are giving an older gentleman a hard time. They're about to cross a serious line." The officer's voice came back, calm but detached. "A discipline issue, Gunny? Shouldn't that go through their company command?" "Normally, yes," Miller replied, trying to stay patient. "But the civilian they're hassling is named Alan Palmer." Silence filled the line, just static and hesitation. Miller could almost hear the lieutenant processing the name. Finally, the officer spoke, the word sounding uncertain. "Palmer? Do I know that name?" Lieutenant Miller asked, his tone hardening. "Run it up the chain or now? Tell them it's about his rifle, the orange one." He hung up before the officer could ask more. He'd started something. Now he had to hope it didn't blow up in everyone's faces. Inside the base command center, climate-controlled and quiet, Lieutenant Harris stared at his phone. Gunny Miller wasn't a man prone to alarm. Harris entered Alan J. Palmer into the global personnel database. The system churned, then a bright red flag appeared. Access restricted. Eyes only. 007 and above. Harris felt the impact like an electric shock. Brigadier General. He was a second lieutenant. He rose and walked fast to the base commander's office, a full colonel, and knocked before entering. "Sir, you need to see this," he said. The colonel, a man whose face mapped 3 decades of desert deployments, looked up, annoyed. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "I got a call from Gunny Miller at the long range. There's a civilian out there, Alan Palmer. The system flagged him heavily." The colonel's expression changed instantly. He stepped around his desk, looked at Harris's screen, then lost color. He said nothing, picked up the secure desk line that connected directly to the commanding general's office. "Ma'am, it's Colonel Price. I apologize for the interruption." "Sir, he's here." "Palmer, he's on our range right now." A pause. "Yes, ma'am." "The ghost of the valley. He's in a confrontation with some of our recon Marines." The colonel listened, face set. "Yes, ma'am. I'll meet you at your vehicle. We're rolling now." He slammed the phone down and stared at Harris with an intensity the lieutenant had never seen. "Get me the commander of 1st Recon on the line. Tell him his career's in jeopardy. Tell him General Marcus is en route personally, and God help his Marines." Back at the range, Corporal Evans's patience had finally snapped. The old man's silent refusal to move felt like a personal affront. The growing crowd and the challenge to his authority, his identity as a Marine NCO, pushed him over the edge. "All right, that's it. I'm done asking," he barked, his voice breaking with tension. "You are a danger to this facility and to my Marines. I am ordering you to vacate this firing point immediately." The question hung in the air. Am I supposed to know that name? Lieutenant Miller said, his voice hardening. Run it up the chain and now. Tell them it's about his rifle, the orange one. He ended the call before the officer could ask more. He'd started something he couldn't stop. Now all he could do was wait and hope it didn't explode into chaos. At the range, the mood shifted. Evans advanced, threatening. If you don't, I will have you detained for trespassing and obstructing a training exercise. We'll get you a long mental evaluation. Maybe you're confused, old man. Maybe you forgot where you are. He moved as if to take Palmer's shoulder and physically remove him from the bench. He never got the chance. A low rumble began underfoot, a vibration that ran through boots and teeth. It swelled into the thunderous roar of high-performance engines. Every head turned toward the main access road as a cloud of dust surged up, heralding a convoy. 3 black government-plated SUVs and a lead Humvee charging down the road at dangerous speed. They bypassed the lot, raggedly tore onto the graded dirt of the range, and skidded to a stop just yards from the confrontation. Doors flew open. Figures poured out with a disciplined urgency that made the young Marines look clumsy. Colonel Price stepped from the lead SUV, but the arrival that stole every breath was the passenger of the second vehicle. Brigadier General Marcus, and known for her iron will and a combat record few could match, stepped onto the dirt. Her uniform was immaculate, her single star catching the sun. Her eyes scanned the scene. The aggressive posture of Corporal Evans, the stunned expressions of his men, and finally the calm figure seated at the bench. She ignored the rest and walked directly to Alan Palmer. The range fell utterly silent. Only the crunch of her boots and the ping of cooling engines broke the stillness. Evans froze, his hand mid-reach, unable to process what he saw. General Marcus stopped in front of Palmer. She did not speak. She snapped her heels together, lifted her arm, and gave the most precise, respectful salute Evans had ever seen. Not the routine gesture for rank, but one reserved for extraordinary respect. Mr. Palmer, she said clearly across the quiet range, it is an honor, sir. I apologize for the conduct of my Marines. They do not know who they address. She held the salute. Alan Palmer rose slowly with a straightness that belied his years, and offered a slight nod. Only then did the general lower her hand. She turned to Corporal Evans. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold edge. Corporal, she said, voice controlled and severe. Do you know who this man is? Evans, pale and shaking, stammered. No, ma'am. He's a civilian, ma'am. The general let out a short, humorless laugh. A civilian? She repeated. Corporal, you and your men stand on ground you have not earned, breathing air you did not sacrifice for in the presence of a man who helped build the world you serve in. This is not merely a civilian. This is Alan Palmer. She pronounced his name like a benediction, pausing to let it settle over the assembled crowd. For those who lack the knowledge, she continued, this man holds the highest civilian valor award our nation can grant. He consulted on special projects for DARPA for 30 years. Before that, he served in conflicts that rarely appear in your textbooks. He has 5 confirmed kills beyond 2,500 yards, a record that stood for almost 40 years, all with a rifle he designed and built. He shaped the sniper doctrine you now follow. We call him the Ghost of the Valley, not because he is dead, but because he went into places others could not, completed missions others would not attempt, and left no trace. She stepped to the bench and pointed at the orange rifle. And this, the object you mocked, is the Mark V, the prototype for the M210 system you carry, Corporal. He made it in a forward operating base from salvaged parts and a block of aluminum. The bright orange? It wasn't for show. It was so a medevac could spot him after he spent 3 days holding off an enemy platoon to protect a downed pilot. That color saved his life and the pilot's life, the pilot who later became a 4-star general. Silence thickened across the range, now mixed with shame and awe. Corporal Evans seemed to wish the earth would swallow him. His squad mates, who had been loud and joking minutes earlier, stared at their boots, faces flushed with humiliation. General Marcus's voice dropped to a cold, measured growl. You did not see a veteran. You saw an old man. You did not see history. You saw a toy. You saw weakness where you should have recognized extraordinary strength. You have dishonored your uniform, your corps, and yourselves, she pointed at him. You and your squad will report to my office at 600 tomorrow for a lesson in Marine Corps history and professional courtesy. It will be a lesson you will not soon forget. As the general's words settled, Alan Palmer finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, yet it carried a calm authority that commanded more respect than even the general's anger. "General," he said evenly, "they're young, proud, and that's not a bad thing. They just need to learn how to direct it." Alan Palmer turned his gaze toward Corporal Evans. There was no anger in his eyes, only the quiet wisdom of experience. "Son, your duty isn't just to be strong. It's to honor the strength that came before you. Remember, humility weighs more than any pack you'll ever carry, but it will take you farther than pride ever will." He lightly tapped the orange rifle beside him. In that moment, another memory surfaced, sharper, clearer. He was younger, working in a small improvised workshop filled with the smell of oil and damp earth. His hands were steady as he shaped the rifle's receiver. Nearby, the injured pilot he had saved lay on a cot, feverish and weak. "Why paint it orange, Al?" the pilot had murmured. Without looking up, Alan had answered, "Because I only plan to take one shot. After that, I want to be easy to find, one way or another." That memory reflected a kind of courage few could comprehend, a man building his own lifeline, knowing success or death would depend on a single, impossible shot. The consequences that followed were immediate and firm. General Marcus kept her word. Corporal Evans and his squad spent the next month under a demanding remedial program. They didn't just study history, they lived it. Their days were spent cleaning and restoring artifacts in the base museum, and their nights writing essays on Medal of Honor recipients. The experience humbled them more deeply than any physical punishment could. The story of the old man with the orange rifle spread quickly across the base, in a quiet reminder that arrogance has no place in service and that true heroes often walk unnoticed among them. Before long, a new base-wide directive was issued. Every Marine would attend annual training on veteran relations and respect for elders. A few weeks later, Corporal Evans was in the base library, reading through declassified reports from wars half a century old. The door opened and Alan Palmer stepped inside, moving with the same calm presence as always, heading toward the engineering section. Evans's heart pounded. He stood quickly, straightening his posture. "Mr. Palmer," he began quietly. "Sir, I wanted to apologize properly. There's no excuse for how I acted. I was arrogant and wrong. I'm truly sorry." Alan paused, studying the young Marine. He saw the genuine remorse, a boy humbled and a man beginning to take shape. A faint smile crossed his face. "I told you, son," he said gently. "Humility suits you. You wear it well." They shared a brief, silent moment of mutual respect, and the lesson had been learned. A week later, the range was closed for a special demonstration. General Marcus stood alongside Colonel Price and several senior officers. Evans and his squad were present too, standing quietly at attention. Alan Palmer lay prone behind his orange rifle, preparing to show what it could do. The 400-meter target shimmered in the distance, the same one Evans had once dismissed as out of reach. Without ceremony, Alan adjusted his scope with practiced precision, reading the wind as if it were visible to his eyes. He became still, part of the landscape itself. Then came the sound, one clean, sharp shot. For several seconds there was silence. Then a light flashed green on the distant screen, a perfect bullseye dead center. The target was over 4,000 meters away. A quiet gasp spread through the crowd. It wasn't just a great shot, it was extraordinary, almost beyond belief. In that instant, the legend of the Ghost of the Valley and his orange rifle was no longer just a story. It was real, witnessed by every person there. If Alan Palmer's story of quiet courage and unseen strength moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who honors our veterans. Subscribe to Veteran Valor for more true stories of the unrecognized heroes who walk among us. Your support helps us continue to preserve their legacy.